Okay guys, so in this tutorial I'm going to show you the most important thing you will ever learn in coding. Whatever you think you know in coding, whatever you think is the most important thing, you're wrong unless you think it's this. So, right. So let's jump into it. So, I am in the same application we've been making in the rest of the tutorials. However, I've jumped straight into code view, so if you don't know how to do that, if we just right click on the Solution Explorer, right click and click View Code, there we go, it takes you straight to the code view. Right, now, what is so important that I would call it the most important thing to know when you're coding? And the thing is, I emphasize, as important as this is, it is one of the most neglected rules that exists in coding, honestly. And it's incredibly important, and it is enough to make a real software engineer scream expletives to you if you don't do this correctly. What could I possibly be talking about? I'm talking about something that we call a comment. And now everyone's switching off. For those of you that are still here, a comment is basically something that we can put into code that we can use to write a message to anyone else that's reading the code. It's not executed by the program, and it is simply a message either for us or for the next person to read the code. So at the moment we're looking at the code that we wrote to demonstrate declaring a string. So btn string run, we created a string, we then gave the string the value of text string input.text, and then we outputted that plus some extra stuff. But as code gets more complicated, it actually can get incredibly hard to read, or extremely long. At which point, you can't expect someone to be able to quickly read through it like that, even if it's you later on. In a big programming task or project, you actually won't remember the functions you first design at the start. You might not even remember how the function you made yesterday works, because you are doing so many different functions that do different things in different parts of the program. So even if no one else other than you ever looks at your program, comments are still incredibly important. So, enough yabbering. How do we do a comment? In C#, it's quite easy. We just do a double slash, and you'll see that the line has turned green. So in this case, we can write this is a comment. Now, anything after that double slash will be considered a comment until you go to the new line. So there we've got actual code then. So, how do we use them? Well, there's a couple of ways that this should be used. So, whenever you're creating a method, so this is a method here. Whenever we're creating a new method, we actually should be explaining what it does. So, we do a 3 one. Okay? We don't need that. The Visual Studio generates that. And we can just get rid of that. And this method does, well, is the event method for the string demo. Now, at this point, we might actually want to specify any inputs and outputs from it. We don't have any inputs at the moment. There's nothing coming in from other methods outside this method. It actually gets all of its data internally. So it gets data here, and it outputs data here, but it doesn't get passed data from any other parts of the program. So we don't necessarily need that just yet, but we do need to say outputs a message to screen as input string. So basically we just write a brief explanation of what the code does. Now if we have outputs leading to other parts of the program, we should then put in variables. So as an example, say let's just pretend that input string wasn't going to screen and it was going to some other part of the program. So we might put input and then a brief explanation of what it is. So if it was a count of cars, you'd say car count, or etc. Now, that's what we will do for every method. And if I'm ever marking your assessments, I will actually be looking to see explanations of each of your methods up here. So I want to be able to know what each method does without actually having to read it and decode it. But there is another thing we can do. So we can also put comments directly after something if you want to make a particular note on something. So input string, variable we use to store the input data from the user. Now, variables should always have a comment explaining what they are and what they're going to be used for. Later on in the course, we'll look at something called a data dictionary, which also helps in this process. But for a reader of the code, you may not have a data dictionary on you, and you may want to have comments. So the other thing we can do is explain processes. So this is a simple process. You probably wouldn't necessarily need to explain it, but in this case we're going to be very explanatory, I guess, very descriptive in this method. So what does this line of code do? It gets the value of text in the text box txt string input and stores it in the variable input string. Okay, fair enough. Now even someone that doesn't necessarily know how to read the code can understand what that line does. Now, again, we'll just explain what the line of code does. So what does this line of code does? Outputs a message to the text box txt string output dot and we might mention the fact that we've also done some string editing here, so that's basically a comment. I cannot emphasize how important they are. You may feel that they're not very much of a value add, but take it from someone who's done quite a lot of coding, and even in a professional environment, not just in a training or a teaching environment. Comments are a lifesaver, both for yourself and for anyone else that reads it. And while you may be too lazy to put them in, can I say that if you make a beautiful program and you're submitting it for your HSE, but your marker can't work out how that actually works, then you won't get a good mark. So in that case, comments could be the difference between high marks and low marks. And in university, I've known lecturers to outright refuse to mark programs that aren't commented correctly. So it is a good habit to get into now. And I strongly recommend every time from here on out that you do any programming, ensure you're putting comments on it. If you have the time, which I hope you do, what I'd like you to now do is go back through the rest of these methods, and put comments on each line, just so we understand how to comment and what these lines of code do. So that's it for this video. Now you've learnt the most important thing in coding, so enjoy the rest of your day.